Hello and welcome to The Awakening with Kelvin Phiri Podcast, part of our Bridges to Prosperity series, where we look at the systems, values and choices shaping the future of Africa by the year 2050. In this episode, we explore a story that has stirred national emotion, the ongoing dispute surrounding the burial of Zambia's former president, Edgar Chagwa Lungu. This story has moved far beyond grief. It now sits at the intersection of law, politics, and public perception, and we must ask, is this still a legal matter, or has it become a battle for sympathy in the court of public opinion? After the Pretoria High Court refused to grant the Lungu family leave to appeal, the earlier ruling remained fully in force. At that point, the government of Zambia had the legal right to act and proceed with the repatriation and burial. However, out of respect for the family, the government chose not to enforce the order immediately. Instead, a joint announcement was made that both parties would enter into mediation talks to find a peaceful way forward. These are the same discussions that Mcebisi Zulu now refers to in his recent statement, talks that were initiated after the court process had already affirmed the government's right to act. The views shared in this episode are based on information already in the public domain, including court judgments, official statements, and credible media reports. We are not journalists or legal experts. This analysis is shared in good faith for civic education and public understanding. It should not be taken as legal advice or as representing any government, institution, or family. Our goal is simply to promote informed discussion and respect for the rule of law. The background: on the 5th of June 2025, Zambia received heartbreaking news: the passing of former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu while receiving treatment in South Africa. In the days that followed, both the Lungu family and the government of Zambia agreed that the former president would be repatriated and buried in Zambia with full state honors. However, tensions later emerged when the family accused the government of altering the agreed burial program, introducing new elements that had not been part of their earlier understanding. In response, the family withdrew from the agreement and announced that the burial would instead take place in South Africa. This breakdown of trust between the family and the government is what ultimately triggered the legal proceedings in the South African courts. However, members of the Lungu family wanted a private burial in South Africa. That disagreement quickly moved from private talks to the courts of law. What the courts decided, the case was heard in the Pretoria High Court. After reviewing evidence from both sides, the court ruled in favor of the government of Zambia, authorizing the repatriation of President Lungu's remains for a state funeral and burial at Embassy Park. In simple terms, the court recognized that the Zambian state has both the right and the duty to ensure a dignified state burial for its former head of state. The family appealed and lost. They then sought permission to take the matter to the Constitutional Court of South Africa, which refused to hear the case, leaving the High Court's ruling intact. As it stands today, the legal position is clear. The government of Zambia has the legal right to receive the body and carry out a state funeral at Embassy Park. The precedent: this is not new. In 2021, when founding President Kenneth Kaunda passed away, his family also objected to his burial at Embassy Park, preferring a private ceremony. The Zambian High Court ruled against that request, declaring that that a former head of state's burial is a matter of national interest. Dr. Kaunda was buried at Embassy Park, setting a national precedent that former presidents are not private citizens. They belong to the story of Zambia itself. That same principle now applies to President Lungu. The family's new statement. Recently, Makebi Zulu, speaking for the Lungu family, released a long statement accusing the government of bad faith, mentioning alleged private investigators, interference with mediators, and a breakdown of trust. He presented it as update on negotiations between the family and the state, but we must remember the courts have already ruled. Nothing in that statement changes the legal facts. Okay, the real goal seems different: to shift the battle from the court of law to the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion. When the courts have spoken and the outcome is unfavorable, the next step for some is to seek victory through emotion. That's where the court of public opinion comes in. In this space, the rules of evidence no longer apply. What matters is how people feel, not what the record says. By portraying the government as insensitive, the family's spokesperson builds sympathy, even though every legal process from the High Court to the Constitutional Court has confirmed the government's right to act. But sympathy cannot replace legality. As citizens, we must distinguish between narrative and truth. The truth is that the courts have spoken and their rulings remain in force. The role of the state. We must also understand the duty of the state. A president is not just an individual. He is a symbol of the nation. When a president dies, the government is obliged, both morally and constitutionally, to ensure a state funeral that reflects national honor and continuity. By arranging for President Lungu's burial at Embassy Park, the government is not taking power from the family. It is fulfilling its legal duty to the people of Zambia. This is not about politics. It is about preserving the dignity of the presidency and the unity of the nation. The danger of emotional narratives. We live in an age where social media can magnify emotion faster than truth. When statements are broadcast without full context, facts are easily lost. What begins as grief can turn into public misinformation. If every court ruling that some disagree with becomes a political campaign, then we risk undermining the justice system itself. The ongoing commentary surrounding this issue has blurred the line between legal reality and emotional persuasion. We must not let that happen. Lessons for the nation. This dispute teaches us that democracy requires more than passion. It requires respect for institutions. When the courts rule, we must accept those rulings. That is how the rule of law is upheld. Families have every right to mourn and to express their pain. But they do not have the right to ignore legal decisions or to reshape public opinion against a lawful judgment. The statement by Makebi Zulu is therefore not a legal move. It is a public relations strategy aimed at influencing emotion after losing in court. And that is why it is critical that we see it for what it is, an attempt to move this case from the court of law to the court of public opinion. Moving forward as a country, we need closure, not more conflict. The courts have spoken, the law is clear, and the path forward should be one of dignity and respect. The late President Edgar Chagwa Lungu deserves a peaceful and honorable farewell, just like every other head of state before him. Let us allow that process to unfold without distortion or division. Let us also remember that our reactions, whether on social media or in conversation, should reflect truth and respect, not anger and misinformation. Closing, at times like this, we are reminded that nations are built on truth, not noise. The rule of law must always stand above the rule of emotion. If we can learn to respect court decisions, even when they are hard to accept, then we strengthen our democracy and honor those who served before us. as we continue building bridges to prosperity, may we choose unity over division, fact over feeling, and justice over propaganda. Thank you for joining us on the Awakening with Kelvin Phiri podcast. Until next time, let's keep the conversation grounded in truth and guided by wisdom.